Classic Tafsir.
Where should I begin when I'm starting at the end? Pursuing the higher aim, learning the meaning of every page. Where should I begin when I'm starting at the end?
Assalamu alaikum. Sunnahfollowers presents a new class, the Muqasid of Tafsir, being taught and brought to you by Ustada Layla Nashiba. Please stay tuned, streaming on all major platforms, right here on channel Sunnahfollowers.
Inna alhamdulillah, wa salat wa salam ala wa rasulullah. I want to welcome everybody to our class on the Muqasid Tafsir. This is another book written by Sheikh Kareem Abu Zaid. That's how the book looks. And again, you can get over to Amazon.com and get a copy of this book. This book is also on sale for $18.90. $18.90. So please go ahead and for those of you who don't have the book, you want to get this book. And also for those of you who do not yet have the book entitled Know Your Lord, yeah, you want to learn, you want to pick up that book too, which is also $18.90. Yeah, $18.90 a piece for both books. So make sure you get a copy of it. Excuse me. And for tonight, we're going to be continuing with this book, pages 72, pages 72 through 77. We're going to speak about how, when it comes to interpreting the Quran, we already talked about some of the approaches that the interpreter uses. Who can tell us what are some of the approaches that we discussed that the interpreter may use to interpret a verse of the Quran? Who can remember? What are some of the techniques that may be implemented when interpreting a verse of the Quran? Anyone? Don't let it be Yasmin the answer either. Anyone else? What are some of the techniques that the interpreters use to interpret the Quran to you or to me?
The analytics, the I don't know how to pronounce it, but the theometic and those two, thematic, analytic, and can't remember the third one.
Okay, she said one of the approaches that they use is the analytical approach. The analytical approach. Who can tell us what is the analytical approach in interpreting a verse from the Quran? What's the analytical approach? Let me open up my Zoom room so I can call on these people. Hold on. Yeah, y'all see how many of them sitting up? Oh yeah, Sheikh Morsi watching. Yeah, don't worry, Sheikh, I got it. All right. Let's start at the bottom. Sister Rockmo, what is the analytical approach in interpreting the Quran? Sister Omar here, what is the analytical approach in interpreting the Quran?
I'm sorry, sister. I don't even understand what is that word.
Well, pay attention in class. Okay, let's see.
The word big sister for me.
All right, who else is in here? Norto, what's the analytical approach in interpreting a verse of the Quran? It's the approach that I use all the time. Brother Tarek has an answer. Okay, let's look at Brother Tarek's answer. He done saved my little knuckleheads in the Zoom room. Okay, let me close this up. Y'all better pay attention in class. I don't know what y'all doing, but y'all better get it together. Hello. Sheikh Morsi's listening. Okay, Brother Tarek. Brother Tarek said the analytical approach is when you break it down word by word, verse by verse. That's the approach I use with the Quran and with the Hadith. I'll tell y'all what's the meaning of that word. I tell you, get your Webster's dictionary. What does it mean? Good job, Nadia. It's when we break down the meaning of a verse of the Quran word by word, phrase by phrase. We also include the grammar and all of that. So y'all see, I'm not being mean. When I tell y'all to look it up in a dictionary, some of these sisters get attitude with me. Oh yeah, that's why I only got 30 women that follow me. Y'all know that? The rest of my followers are men. Why is it that Layla has 30 women that follow her and the rest are all men? Women are arrogant, you know. You do think somebody's trying to flow show. What's that word that Fresno used to say for me? What's that word your mama used to use, Mina? Clowning. Yeah. Fresno and them used to say, Layla always clowning people. Now y'all see, I've never clowned you. That's just the way I teach. I use the analytical approach. That's the way I was taught by Mukhtar's father. That was my first teacher, and Mukhtar's mother. As y'all can see, Mukhtar uses the same approach too. Technically, Latifa does too. We were taught to use the analytical approach when it comes to the Quran and the Hadith. So I never clowned you guys. That's the way we teach. That's the way a person is supposed to teach. Well, that's how you know you got a good teacher. Okay, so one of the approaches is the analytical approach. But the analytical approach isn't done alone. There's other approaches attached to it. What's another approach attached to learning, to interpreting the Quran or the Hadith? Not just the analytical approach, we also attach another approach with it. What's the other one? She said thematical. Yeah, Mina said thematical. Who can tell us what is the thematic? The thematic approach. What do we mean by thematic? We use the analytical approach combined with thematics. What's thematics?
Thematic is basically when you take a subject, a theme or object or something that relates to you and apply it to yourself. So it's like the highest one that we can do because it's closer to what the companions did.
Yeah, and not just to yourself, but it can be to a topic. Like if we want to break down a topic that's impacting us as a nation. So we analyze the Quran or we analyze the Hadith word for word, verse by verse, looking at the grammar and all of that without changing the meaning. And we also apply it to a theme or a subject. The subject could be alcohol. The subject can be intoxicants. The subject can be wearing a hijab. The subject can be free mixing. Whatever the subject is or whatever the topic is. So thematic means this is my topic. My topic today is free mixing. So now what we're going to do is look at all the verses of the Quran and the Hadith that relate to that theme of free mixing to reach a decision. And so that takes us to the third approach that the first two are usually combined with. What's that third approach that she didn't mention? We gather the verses, the words, the topic, the subject matter to do what with it? What are we trying to do? We're trying to make a what?
Comparison.
Exactly. We're making a comparison. Exactly. So y'all see, Fresno, I never clowned you, did I? I'm not a clowner. I'm a teacher. I keep telling y'all I'm a dyer. And so don't get upset or offended when y'all tell me that, when I tell y'all to look up the meaning of the words. This is how we teach. That's the same thing Sheikh Kareem Abu Zaid does. Sheikh Kareem Abu Zaid, he uses all three approaches too. Why is it that y'all say y'all can listen to some of us and we sound alike? You listen to Sheikh Kareem Abu Zaid break down. He sounds like me. He's going to tell you to look up the word. What does it mean? What's the linguistics? Okay, he's going to look up the hadith, break down the meaning. Okay? How does it relate to the subject? And how can we compare that to this? That's the approach most of us use. Okay? Then we talked about how some people take it further, like Dr. Dramali. Dr. Dramali will take it further. Dr. Dramali will not just deal with he will not just use an analytical approach. He will not just use a thematic approach. He will not just use the comparative. What does Dr. Dramali include? Science. He'll also look at it from a scientific approach as well, because Dr. Dramali is a legal scientist. He's a scientist. Also, Sheikh Morsi. For those of you, you don't know Sheikh Morsi. Sheikh Morsi doesn't just use thematic, analytical, and comparative. He taught me that. Okay? But Sheikh Morsi takes it higher. He aims higher. He aims higher. That's what the shuyukh do. They aim higher. Like Dramali. Sheikh Morsi combines science. He looks at the science behind it too. Okay? And Sheikh Morsi adds linguistics to it too, because he speaks that Fusha. So he'll add science and linguistics. That's what Dr. Asim does too. Dr. Asim adds science like Dramali, and Dr. Asim is real big on linguistics, because that's Dr. Asim's specialty, is that linguistics. Okay? But when we do all that, we have to be careful that we don't change the meaning. Y'all understand? And this is the problem today, because you have other duat or other scholars or other daya or other teachers who get so wrapped up in the science, they've taken it to another level called theology. I tell y'all, run away from that. When y'all hear people taking it on that level to a philosophical and deductive logic, they're using symbolic logic. That's a science, a philosophy. They'll take it to the extremes with deductive logic and symbolic logic. This is where we get it twisted. That's why we have a group of brothers today thinking that they can redo the laws of Allah, that they can add layers and they can categorize Allah's laws into essentials and non-essentials, because they done transgressed and went all into the philosophical crap. Not based on no evidence from the hadith too. And that's what we're going to talk about today. That's our topic today. In order to be a good interpreter and a correct interpreter, not only must you know how to apply those things I mentioned, all those things I mentioned, but also you have to know two things. You have to know the order the order of the Quran. And this is where we lose it. You have to also know the history. I'm a biggie on that. What do I add? Dr. Dramali, he does all three and adds linguistics to it, and he'll add a lot of science to it and stuff too. What do I add? I also add a lot of history. That's me, because I'm a historian. Okay? What does Mukhtar do? History. He was taught the same way as me. Okay, analyze. Use a theme. Use comparative. Never, ever, ever deviate away from the history. Know the history. Know the history and know the order. We know the history and we know the order. You have to know those two things too. Dramali knows the history. He knows the order. He knows all of that. That's his specialty. The science of the Quran and the science of the Hadith are Dr. Dramali's specialty. Sheikh Morsi, same thing. Okay. Sheikh Saud, same thing. Okay. So that's what we're going to talk about. So let me put the PowerPoint up, and I gave you guys the pages that we're going to be reading, studying from today, pages 72 through 77. And one of the reasons why I was not in the Zoom room after the other class is because this is a lot. I tried to simplify it for you, and I didn't want to be distracted. I tried to simplify this for you, put it in plain terms so you can understand. Because this class, what I am teaching you, the Chalcidic Tafsir, this is what you learn in college. If you were going to an Islamic university, if you were going to El Azhar University, you would be learning this. They're not going to teach you this stuff in a masjid, because this is not basic knowledge. So I tried to make it simple, keep it simple for you. So let's put the PowerPoint up. Yeah, that's why you couldn't reach me in the Zoom room. Now, for the sister that's asking, although I don't have to owe you an explanation as to my whereabouts, you ain't my mother. That's a joke. But that's why I wasn't in the Zoom room. I had to take care of my PowerPoint. All right, let's put it up on the screen. All right, here we go. Yeah, she said she came in the Zoom room one to ask me a question. I wasn't in there. Ask it to me after the class. But I had to do this PowerPoint, seriously. Okay, guys, so look at this PowerPoint. Yeah. So today we're going to cover pages 72 through 77. The importance of knowing the history of Islam. What's the history of Islam? The seerah, the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the history of Islam. If the interpreter does not know the history of Islam, he's not going to give you the correct interpretations. I don't care. And we're going to go over that. And he also has to know the order of the Quran, and we're going to get to that. So let's put the PowerPoint up. Let's look at how Sheikh Kareem starts this off. Make sure that it's big enough for you guys to see too. Put the first one up. Yeah, okay, I'm going to, hold on, let me make my thing smaller for me so you guys can really, I'm going to make me on the side smaller. I want y'all to see this stuff. Get a screenshot. Okay. Now, the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's one of the crucial gates to unlock the treasure of the Quran. Why? It's just common sense. The Quran was revealed in stages. Something had to happen. There's a few verses that Allah sent down that nothing happened, but most of all the other verses, something happened for Allah to say what he said. So you have to know the place, the time, and the circumstances surrounding the words of Allah, the revelation. And this is why a lot of these young brothers today on social media, they make this mistake. They don't know the circumstances around a verse. So they'll misconstrue the meaning of it. They'll tell you that the verse relates to something that when it didn't relate to it. This is a big mistake that we see as Daya. So this knowledge, knowing the history behind the revelation, this will guide the interpreter who is struggling to give the most correct answer, the most correct meaning that can be applied to yourself. This knowledge will aid him in that. Does everybody understand? That's why not everyone can answer questions about Islam. This is why the companions, they were not like the Muslims today. Everybody wants to be a scholar today. Everybody wants to jump up and show off and answer questions. The companions didn't do that because they knew the seriousness of giving wrong answers. Especially when you ain't qualified, you don't know the history, you don't know what happened. Okay? So to reach the higher aim of understanding the Quran, we have to know the history. And why is it that we're struggling? What is our higher aim? Correct knowledge, so we can apply it in our heart and make it become understanding and live by it. Because the Quran is the key to us having the best life possible in this world. And just like we talked about earlier today, it took 23 years. The Quran was not sent down in one day. A lot of Muslims think that the Quran was sent down in one day during the month of Ramadan. No. It took 23 years of revelation for the Quran to be complete. And so this is why whoever is going to interpret a verse has to know the history, the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad. He should also know about those companions. We can talk about Ibn Taymiyyah. May Allah be pleased with him. It seems like Muslims today know all about Ibn Taymiyyah. They know all about Imam Malik. They know all about Imam Hanafi. They know all about Ibn Kathir. They know all about Imam Nawawi. But if I were to start giving you names of the companions, you ain't gonna know who I'm talking about. You have to know them too. You have to master the science of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his life. You have to master who those original companions were and what roles they played in shaping this deen, because they are the ones who died establishing that deen for us today. Okay? We have to know that there is nothing that's happening on this planet today that's worse than what the companions endured. We have to understand that those original companions, they were in conditions even worse than Gaza. Oh yeah. Worse than Bosnia. Oh yeah. Worse than the slave trade in America. Oh yeah. We have to understand that the condition of the Muslims evolved through many trials and from weakness to strength. And this ummah has endured more trials than anything else. It all began with the calling to Allah. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how many of you knew that he had to do dawah for secret for 3 years? He had to do his dawah in secret. And the Muslims only had one place in the first 3 years of his mission that they could meet, and that was the house of El Arqam. Okay? They had to hide who they were because they were persecuted unbelievably. for their faith, their belief. Okay? They had to seek protection from other tribes. And then when they could no longer practice Islam in Mecca, they had to migrate and seek protection from somewhere else. And that's when the first Islamic state was established in Medina, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam lived for the remainder of his life. It was when they were able to migrate to Medina that they were able to establish the first Islamic state, and they lived amongst the Jews and the Christians. The Prophet had to bring peace to all three factions. He assumed leadership over all three factions. Most Muslims don't know this. Okay? This is what Medina, the city of Medina, has evolved to today. Look at it today. This is a picture of Medina today. Whereas before it was all this desert. Look at it now. The residents of Medina, they signed the first charter to bind them together. It was the first treaty that Muslims and went into with Jews and Christians as well. And they began to grow as a nation. But for 6 years almost, for 6 years after migrating there, the Muslims in Medina suffered repeated attacks, not just from the pagan Arabs who wanted to wipe them out from Mecca, but also some of the tribes, and also even the Jews pitched in. Those original companions, guys, they fought. They were involved in war from the time they declared La ilaha illallah until their death. Because even after Arabia became a Muslim state, they had to contend with the Romans, the Persians, the Egyptians, and others. So our history is one that evolved. And if the Muslims today learned the history or knew the history of our way of life, how it began, then it would make it easier for us to handle whatever trials that we're faced with today. But unfortunately, this is not happening because we don't have the knowledge. Like I said, I hear a lot of these famous brothers talking about Imam this and Ibn Taymiyyah. I don't hear many of them talking about the Prophet and the companions. Okay? If the Muslim community is experiencing weakness and oppression, we should be able to get our guidance from the early generation of Muslims, because like I said, no one suffered more than them. And Allah himself tells us that they are the best of this nation. Allah sent down the Quran during their time as an ultimate guide to us. And by the way, guys, the Quran never gets outdated. The Quran is never old. It applies to all times. What happened in the 6th century, it applied to then. What's happening here today in 2024, it applies to today too. There's no reformation needed. There is no reforming the Quran. And I want you Muslims in America to understand that, because there's a movement. There's a movement. There's a movement in process right now by a handful of Muslim men who think that they can reform the Quran, that they can reform the laws of Allah, put them in layers, put them in categories of essentials and non-essentials. This is haram. You can't do that. The Quran will be the ultimate guide for us until the day of judgment. And since the Quran is for all times, this very book contains so many teachings. That's why we have to know the biography of our Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the biography of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, cannot be replaced either. Just like we cannot reform the Quran, we cannot reform history either. You can't say, for example, it's okay for the women and men to interact closely. It's okay to put women in positions of leadership today because the society is different today than it was back in the Prophet's time. The Prophet was at constant warfare. So putting a woman in a leadership position would have been crazy because the women were on the battlefield fighting too. You can't use that garbage. What happened then applies to today. Does everybody understand that? But this is a movement that's happening right here in America. A handful of brothers, a handful of men who call themselves scholars. They're not kafirs. And by the way, as Muslims, we never refer to another Muslim as being a kafir. Even when they're doing stuff like this. Even when we got Muslims thinking that they can change Allah's laws to suit the time, we still don't use that kafir word. Okay? We use the word misguided. They're just misguided. Their faith, as we talked about earlier today, why do men do this? Their faith is not grounded. They believe in Allah, but their faith is corrupt. It's not grounded. Their fitra has become damaged. Their fitra has become blackened because of life. Life does that. Faith goes up and down. We talked about that. Strong today, weak tomorrow, depending on what we're faced with in life. But the bottom line, I want you guys to remember, we don't refer to these people as being kafir, but you need to know that the Quran is unchangeable. It's suited for all times. Listen to what Allah says in the interpretation of the meaning. Then, when the sacred months have passed, then kill the polytheists wherever you find them, and capture them, and besiege them, and lie in wait for them in each and every ambush. But if they repent and establish prayer and give charity, then leave their way free. Now, why did Allah send this verse down? A person can read this verse and walk away thinking, wow, you Muslims, y'all some criminals. Y'all go around killing unbelievers. You know, read this verse just as it's worded right here. Then that means that y'all supposed to go around just killing people, capturing people. No, what's the history behind this? This verse was sent down during war times. This is when the Arabs broke a treaty. The Arabs had a treaty that during the sacred months they wouldn't fight. But the Quraysh broke that agreement. And that's when Allah sent this verse down saying, don't sit there and allow them to attack you. They broke the agreement. So when they come after you, then you fight them back. So this is just an example as to why it's so important for us to know the history. Because if you don't know why Allah sent this verse down, you would think that this verse is telling Muslims to go out and just kill people. No, we don't do that. Also, in order for the interpreter to interpret the Quran correctly, not only must he know the history, but he also has to know the order. And this is important. He has to have certainty when it comes to the structure of the Quran, because the order of the chapters instruct the interpreter as to the intended higher meaning. This wasn't by chance that the Quran is in the order that it's in today. A lot of thought was put into that. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But these chapters were put the way they are for a reason, because they help us to get the higher understanding, the most correct understanding of the meaning of the words of Allah for implementation into our lives. Why did Sheikh Kareem Abu Zayd bring this up? Well, because there are two theories. You got two theories out there. We talked about how there's some people who believe that the Quran is the creation of Allah instead of the word of Allah. Well, we got two theories in regards to the arrangement of the Quran. One of the theories is called the Tawqifi theory. The other theory is called Ijtihadi. The Tawqifi theory, it believes that the current order of the written Quran is a result of Allah's instruction and cannot be changed or rearranged. I'm going to repeat that because I know this can get complicated. The Tawqifi theory, these people believe that the current order of the Quran, chapter by chapter, is a result of Allah's instruction and cannot be changed, nor can it be rearranged. The Ijtihadi theory is different. The people with this theory, they understand that the current order of the written Quran is a result of deliberation and deduction. Therefore, the order is subject to change depending on human standards and abilities. Confirmation of the Tawqifi position, which is more favored, assures the sanctity of the speech of Allah and provides the higher based interpretation. Am I making sense? The Ijtihadi people, in other words, they believe that the Quran can be changed. Who does that sound like today? Well, that's what's happening here in America. They believe that the order of the verses can be changed, even the laws, depending on society and all of that. That's the Ijtihadi theory. For those of you in my Zoom room, when I played, exactly, Mina, when I played that recording for you guys, isn't that what those brothers are doing? Isn't that what they're doing? Yes, y'all listened to it and y'all saw this is what they believe. They believe that we can change things. Use ijtihad and change things based on society, based on problems in society. Okay? But the people who follow of the Tawqifi theory position, they understand that there was a reason for the Quran to be put in the order in which it is. And we already know who put it in those orders. Okay? Now let's break it down even more. Scholars who promote the Ijtihadi opinion, they believe that the current order of the book is not from Allah. What does that mean? They say that the arrangement that the Quran is today, chapter by chapter, since the Prophet Muhammad didn't put it that way, that means that it's not from Allah. It's not from Allah. They believe that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not leave this nation with the Quran in arrangement. So this is not from Allah. Now, for my regular students, you guys know what happened. And we're getting ready to get into it. This confusion has transpired because the Quran in the current order it is today, you guys know that it was put in the order that it's in today, beginning, first of all, with the Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, after the Battle of Yamama. Okay? The Tawfiqi theory suggests the absence of evidence of an early documented order, and this theory contradicts divine decree. And it gets very, very confusing, I know. That's why we have to know the history of this religion. There's a reason why the Prophet didn't put the Quran in an order. First of all, the Quran wasn't complete until right before he died. Plus, Allah tells us himself what was some of the last verses that Allah sent down. Allah said in the interpretation of meaning, verily it is we who have sent down the Quran, and indeed we will guard it. We will prevent it from ever being corrupted. Whenever Allah, let's go over the history of how the Quran was collected into a book form, because the Quran are the words of Allah. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam could not read. He could not write. When Allah would have Jibreel send a revelation to him, what would the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? He had 4 scribes. He would call upon his scribes and he would recite to them what Jibreel had taught him, and all 4 of them would write it down. Listen to what Umar ibn al-Khattab said. He said, there is nothing that I asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about its meaning more than the Kalala, until he stabbed me with his finger in my chest and said, the verse that is at the end of the chapter of the women should suffice for you. So this here shows that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did identify a specific order other than the chronological. Okay? Also, wait a minute, hold on. Come on, page. Trying to get this PowerPoint to turn. What happened? I got stuck. The reason why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not compile the entire Quran in a book from form during his lifetime was because the revelation continued until his death. As Ibn Mahs said, while I was with Aisha, the mother of the believers, a person from Iraq came and asked what type of shroud is best to be buried in. And Aisha said, may Allah be merciful to you. What does it matter? He said, oh, mother of the believers, show me the copy of your Quran. And then Aisha took out the copy of the Quran for the man, and she told him where to go. And by the way, Aisha could not read. Aisha could not write, but she was able to refer him to the verse in their proper order as to where he could find his answer. Okay? So even though the Quran was not put in the order that it is today, that does not mean that it's not from Allah. Okay, does everybody understand that? And also, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam always instructed his scribes. He always instructed his scribes where to place the new pieces of the revelation he received. As Uthman, may Allah be pleased with him, said, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to receive the revelation of chapters with many verses. When they were revealed, he would call his scribes and tell them, put these verses in such chapter where such and such is mentioned. So it is divinely from Allah. The prophet didn't have it wasn't in a range like it is, because the revelation kept coming. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did instruct his companions where to put them. And the companions memorized the Quran by heart, and they would recite it in all the daily prayers. Okay? And most of them that could read and write had their own mushaf. Abu Bakr, he had his mushaf. Umar had his mushaf. Hafsa was the only wife that could read and write. She had her mushaf. Okay? So there remains no doubt that the present arrangement of the Quran and the order of the Quran is the intended one, according to the will of Allah. Does everybody understand that? But you're going to find ignorant Muslims today who try to debate and argue that. Oh yeah,